Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Concord Can Coffee on this remarkably wintry day. It's so good to see so many people here interested in learning about the incentives for purchasing electric vehicles. Switching over from cars that run on gasoline to electric vehicles is one of the most important changes that we need to take in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce the risks of climate change. I'm happy to welcome our speakers today, Jan Assetti and Mark Scribner. Jan Assetti is the Energy Conservation Coordinator at the Concord Municipal Light Plant and is responsible for developing and promoting the many energy savings incentives that have been developed at the light plant. Mark Scribner is an electric vehicle specialist from Energy New England. He works as a consultant for a number of municipal utilities, including the CMLP. I know he's done a deep dive into the Inflation Reduction Act, and so is very knowledgeable about the incentives available to you from the federal government, as well as those from the Massachusetts state and the incentives developed locally. Also, Laura Davis, a Concord resident, will speak about electric bicycles. After they've finished their presentation, there'll be a brief opportunity for people to make announcements, and then Jan and Mark will answer your questions. You can put your questions in the chat at any time during the presentation. You will also have the opportunity to ask questions to them directly during the question period. So again, welcome Jan and Mark for their presentations. I think Mark and Jan, you're probably both muted, so if you can unmute yourselves.
Thank you very much, Janet.
Thank you, Janet.
So I'll go ahead and share my screen. And we just make this full screen. Okay, can everybody see this all right?
Yeah, second. Looks
Great.
good.
Okay, great. So as Janet mentioned, we're here to talk about incentives. We're also going to talk about some services that can help you make the transition or help others make the transition to driving electric. So I will let Mark lead off and talk about federal incentives available.
Sure. So there was already a federal EV tax credit that had been in place as of last year that was similar in a few ways to what's available now. It was also a $7,500 tax credit. It was only for the first 200,000 vehicles that each manufacturer was going to make. And it did have some different requirements, but that all changed when, as Janet mentioned, when the Inflation Reduction Act passed. The very next day, in fact, it changed after that passed to this new incentive design. And the really good news is that rather than phase out based on any number of vehicles, it's really an unlimited number of vehicles that any manufacturer is selling that qualify all the way through until 2032. So I think it's really going to boost EV adoption. It's got a long-term impact here. It still is an up to $7,500 tax credit, and some of the new requirements or restrictions, depending upon how you look at it, in order to make the sausage in Congress and get this passed as a bipartisan rule. Now all vehicles have to have their final assembly in North America to even qualify for any incentive at all. That would be the US, Canada, or Mexico is what they would consider where it needs to be assembled. They did lower, actually, the size of the battery requirement. It used to be that to get the full credit, it needed to be a 16 kilowatt hour battery, which is kind of still a small battery. It was what was in the original Chevy Volt plug-in hybrid, for example. They've lowered that now to just a 7 kilowatt hour battery to qualify. And the idea there is, encourage people to get in a plug-in hybrid if they're not ready for a battery electric. Take that first step into a plug-in electric vehicle, and then maybe your next car can be an all-electric. So I think that's a good thing. the tax credit now can only be applied once every 3 years. So you can't keep buying a new vehicle every year for a particular taxpayer. And then there's ways around that if you have multiple taxpayers in a household, obviously. They did, for the first time, also put price caps on the vehicles, $80,000 for what they consider SUVs, pickups, trucks, and vans. And there was some arguments about that, and they actually reclassified certain vehicles, including the Tesla Model Y, the Ford Mustang Mach-E, and a few others as SUVs, so that the cap could get raised on those. But for smaller cars, it's going to be $55,000 maximum. And again, they're trying to provide the incentive to the people with buying more affordable cars. Then there's also some income caps. You can see those on the right for eligibility. Those things are all new. So talk to your tax professional if you want more information, or reach out to us. Next slide. So there actually are additional restrictions. So it's a great time right now to buy, because the base restriction right now is just the vehicle has to meet those previous qualifications and be assembled in the US. Sometime in March, we don't know when, we expect that now the tax credit's going to get split into two, and you only get half of it for the assembly part, and then the other half, the other 3750, is going to be, where did the battery come from? So 40% of the critical minerals need to have come from the US or a free trade partner, and those percentages are going to increase each year as time goes on. It's not on the slide, but I'll say one exciting thing that I learned is that if battery materials are recycled in the US, regardless of where they originally came from, they're considered US or North American materials. So we're going to see a lot of battery recycling become popular because of this law. So I think that's another good side effect. Next slide. And the other exciting thing is, for the first time, there's now a used EV tax credit. So you can now, effective immediately, buy a used EV that qualifies and get up to $4,000 or 30% of the purchase price, whichever is less. There are some restrictions on that. Again, this is for more affordable EVs, so it's $25,000 and under used EVs, and then some of the similar requirements there, as well as some income restrictions you can see on the right that are lower than the new ones. And just to remind everyone, all of these tax credits are what they call non-refundable tax credits. So you have to have the tax liability. You have to either owe or have withheld the tax in order to receive your own tax dollars back. They're not refundable tax credits. And again, that's just what politically what they had to do in order to get these things passed. So you, again, check with your tax attorney. Next slide. And something coming for next year is they are figuring out ways to make the federal EV tax credit actually a point of sale, or sometimes they call that cash on the hood. So you'll be able to get the rebate at the dealer in some cases in 2024 to reduce that cost. It'll come off a line item rather than having to wait to file it for your taxes. So it's almost like a loan of your own tax refund from the federal government. The IRS is still developing guidance on this, so we don't know much more about it yet or when it's going to exactly start. But also keep in mind that you want to make sure that you're going to have the tax liability, because if you get that loan for cash on the hood or point of sale, and then you go to file your taxes next year and it turns out you don't fully qualify, the feds are going to want some money back. So it will impact your tax return, your tax refund or liability. Next slide. I think this is you, Jan.
1 second. Oops. Wait a minute.
Oh, no, wait, there's one more. Okay. And in addition, so it's been a big year this past year for changes. In addition, legislation in the state government is going to drastically change the state more EV rebate, which for a while has been the same thing. It's been $2,500 for battery electric vehicles and $1,500 for plug-in hybrids. Close to when the law passed, as quickly as possible, they pushed through one of the major changes, which was to increase the rebate for battery electric vehicles that qualify. It's now $3,500. The plug-in hybrid one didn't change. And so there are still some minimums here for plug-in hybrids. Have to have a 25 mile battery range. And you can also lease. Leasing has to just be at least 36 months. So the shorter 24-month leases don't qualify. So the only other real requirement is the person needs to be a Massachusetts resident. So it doesn't have a lot of restrictions like the federal requirement. And this is not anything related to taxes. This is a straight rebate. So everyone qualifies. And right now you do this online, typically through the More EV website, but there are lots of future program changes that are coming. We expect them perhaps as soon as April 1st. In spring, we expect that they're going to be phasing out the plug-in hybrid rebates. And this is really in order to save the dollars in the rebate program. And a used EV rebate is expected only for licensed dealer sales. The rebate also, like the federal tax credit, is going to go point of sale, and we'll be following this really closely with Concord Drives Electric to communicate how that's going to work and where that can happen. And they're going to add 2 more rebates that are stackable onto these other rebates. $1,000 if you trade in a gasoline-only vehicle, a non-plug-in vehicle, and an additional $1,500 that could up that up to $5,000 for qualified low income. And there'll be more guidelines on that. So I think we had a question come in, but we could take that now, or should we wait to the end?
I think both questions can wait till the end.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll follow the questions in the chat. If you want to learn more about the More EV program and get the latest changes, that website is more-ev.org. Next slide.
Okay. So in addition to the federal tax credits that Mark just described and the state rebates, CMLP also provides a rebate if you purchase or lease a new or used EV. We offer the largest rebates for households that are at or below 80% of the Boston metro area median income. But as you can see on this chart, we do offer some assistance to all households to offset the cost of purchasing or leasing a new or used EV. And you can learn more information about this program at this particular website down here, where you will find this rebate program and our others listed. And we'll move back to charging stations now.
Yeah, and perfect timing on the question that just popped in, because we're going to answer it right here. So there is a federal EV incentive also tied to the recent legislation. It's called Alternative Fueling Station Tax Credit. That's kind of a cryptic name, but it's not just for EV charging stations, but that is the main interest for a lot of people. And this credit has been a little difficult because it's been on again, off again. It's been existing, and then it's been phasing out, I think, at least 2 times now. But they finally again reinstated this for 10 years till 2032. And what this is for a home, for a residence, it's going to be 30% of the cost of installing the home charging station, up to $1,000. So in other words, if you had to spend $3,000, which most people don't, you could get a third of that, up to $1,000 back. And, I did this myself because I thought it was phasing out. I did it back in late 2021, I think, because it looked like it was going to end. And I got $100 back out of about a $300 project that I had to do just to get, like a dryer or stove type outlet installed in my garage. So whether you have a small project like me or a bigger one, this is really valuable. And it covers any of the parts or labor or equipment. You just have to fill out the appropriate form, which is linked right down here, easy to find, 8911. I think we're still waiting to see that updated for the 2023 tax year. It's still got the 2022 form, which you would expect. And this credit, if you happen to know a business or run a business, there's also a kind of a version of this credit that is for commercial properties, which is much larger. It wants one credit for all of the property or equipment and labor and everything at each location. And it's also generally 30% of that property's cost. They use the term property, but they mean the equipment and all the expenses to install. And it's up to $100,000 starting this year. Last year and before, it was only $30,000. So again, if you had a $300,000 project, you could get a third of that back as a non-refundable tax credit. So it's very generous. I forgot to mention that it now includes bi-directional equipment. So that's equipment that can do vehicle to grid or vehicle to home, is now eligible for this. So this is very exciting, good change as well. And we provide some commercial support. So if you do have a commercial property, we can help you with that too at Concord Drives Electric. Next slide.
And CMLP, in just a few months ago, launched our new commercial EV charging station rebate program. And so in addition to the tax credits that Mark just mentioned, CMLP will now provide up to $6,000 to help your Concord employer or your condominium association, your child's private school or public school, your favorite restaurant or retail outlet, with funding to install a commercial EV charging station similar to the type you see around town, the public charging stations, to provide electric vehicle charging at their location. And in addition to CMLP's portion, the state offers a rebate from the Mass EVIP program. And those two rebates can be combined to help fund a substantial portion of a typical $30,000 dual port charging station installation. You do need, or the applicant for these programs does need pre-approval both from CMLP and Mass EVIP prior to the installation. You'll apply, essentially, give us information about your project. Both CMLP and Mass EVIP would provide you with an award letter, so you would have a commitment from us for the funding. And Mark's team of EV specialists at Energy New England, under contract to CMLP, is available to help your employer, condo association, et cetera, prepare applications for both the CMLP and the Mass EVIP rebate programs. And you can find more information about that program on our website. So in addition to that program, if you charge your EV in your garage or in your driveway, CMLP provides a $250 rebate for installation of a level 2 home charging system. And that can include a new 240 volt circuit if you don't have that amperage yet in your garage or in your home, an outlet, a charging station, one or more of those items are all eligible for our EV level 2 rebate. And for EV owners who are willing to program their car to charge during off-peak hours, which essentially is between 10 at night, 10 to noon during the week, and anytime on the weekend, CMLP offers a bill credit, a monthly bill credit on your electric bill. We, in 2021, we distributed 40 level 2 rebates for people who installed charging systems in their home. In 2023, we distributed 57. That's a 43% increase. And for the for the EV miles bill credits, enrollment in that program went from 213 EVs in 2021 to 290 in 2022. That's a 34% increase. So those are some pretty healthy percentage increases year after year. The Drive EV rebate program that I mentioned earlier, which is the purchase or lease incentive, we started that in September of 2021. In 2022, we were distributing about one every 2 weeks. In 2023 so far, we've distributed 10 Drive EV rebates in just 7 weeks. So more than one a week. That's also a pretty healthy increase in how quickly we're distributing those. So as we've mentioned a couple times, CMLP contracts with Energy New England, specifically Mark and his team, to provide an EV support service to CMLP residential and commercial customers. And so this service is funded by CMLP ratepayer revenue. When all of you pay your electric bill, a little bit of that goes to fund this service. So it is provided free to our customers. The EV specialists are brand and manufacturer and agnostic and technology neutral. So they're not there to promote any particular brand or type of technology. Their goal is to help you figure out what will meet your needs the best. In terms of equipment, but they're also available to answer questions about what EV can best meet your needs and your budget, help you navigate all these rebates and incentives that we've just been talking about, answer questions about charging, and answer questions about the financial implications of buying an EV, the savings that are available to you, et cetera, the lifetime cost of an EV versus a gas vehicle. And they're available a phone call or an email or an online support request away whenever you're ready to start thinking, or people you know are ready to start thinking about buying an EV. And so you can contact them by phone, by email, and there's also an online support request form at develop.ene.org/ConcordMA. And you can just provide some information about the type of help you're looking for, and you'll get a response. I think probably, I'm not sure, Mark, is it within a day or so? Is that your?
Yeah, we get back to everyone within 2 business days. Yeah.
Great. And Mark and his team provide this service to, I think it's 12 other MLPs as well. And at least 250 Concord residents have used this service to help them on their EV buying journey. And we've gotten some really, really good feedback on that service and how helpful it can be. So we thought that it might be helpful for you to hear just a few examples from Mark about specific things that his team has helped people with, just to give you a clear picture of how this can help you and people you know. So Mark, I'll let you.
Sure. And we want to strongly encourage people to reach out, not be shy, reach out, no matter how small you might feel your question or concern is. And one of my favorite stories from Concord was when somebody had reached out to us and said in their message, I really don't know anything about electric vehicles or the technology or how to get started, except that, I now drive a gasoline only vehicle and I really want to switch to an electric vehicle. And we worked with them, and within a month, they had their new electric vehicle in their driveway or in their garage. So it was a really, there's a learning curve, but we can help you accelerate that really quickly by getting through some of the basics. And I think we see a lot of questions around charging, because really, at the end of the day, an electric vehicle is just a car, just like any other car. But what we're talking about here is a different way of fueling a vehicle. You're fueling it most of the time at home. And then when you're fueling it at other places, sometimes it's more convenient than gas. Sometimes it's a trade-off, and you have to get used to a new way of fueling. So we get a lot of questions around that, and we love to help with that area. The exciting thing is, people trying to learn about the brands and models and which type of car is right for them. The exciting thing is there are now more of these different types of vehicles than ever. So chances are there is one that is the right type or size or brand or model for what you're looking for. Let us help you find what that is.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mark? And we have an EV ambassador program, and we love it when local electric vehicle drivers, or even people just enthusiastic about what the mission that we're working on, want to join us and volunteer. So we're always looking for local EV drivers that are interested in more formally becoming one of our EV ambassadors. In order to do that, it's pretty simple. We have an actual assessment. It's a test online, although it's not meant to be like school. It's meant to be a little fun and interesting. We ask that people take that before participating as volunteer staff, for example, in public events or providing some other type of program support to residents. A score of 80% is required, but you can retake it. It's an open book learning assessment, and we have lots of resources we can provide you. But we'd love to have you join us so you can provide your own local anecdotal experience about your own EV journey, about what it's like to own an electric vehicle, and talk to other interested residents and attendees at events. And save the date. We have our next Concord test drive event is going to be held at the high school on Sunday, October 1st. And that is one place where someone who's an EV ambassador can participate in one way or another, perhaps showing a vehicle or providing some other support to the event. So reach out to us through the same way for the EV support if you're interested in becoming one of our EV ambassadors.
And this test drive event, we're hoping it's going to be a pretty big deal. In addition to EV ambassadors being there to show their cars and talk about their experience, we will have the opportunity for people to test drive a variety of EVs. And we hope that we can count on Concord Can to help us publicize this event. I'll have social media graphics and newsletter announcements that we hope you will disseminate to your membership and people you know. So I'll be in touch about that. And we just wanted to let you know about this particular resource too, concorddriveselectric.org. There's a wide variety of resources on this webpage. You can link, with one click, get to that support request form from concorddriveselectric.org. There's also a link to our Drive and Save wizard, which allows you to choose a gas-powered car, a comparable electric car, and it will calculate for you your cost savings and also the emissions reductions that would result from you switching from a particular gas-powered car to an electric car. You can click directly to the More EV website from concorddriveselectric.org. You can even watch some test drive videos from your couch if you're interested in doing some virtual test drives. So here's a quick little list of the different categories of information on concorddriveselectric.org, and we hope that you'll all take advantage of that. So thank you for listening, and we'll turn it back to Janet now.
Well,
and I will stop sharing.
Thank you for that very, very, very informative talks, I should say. And I'm so glad that it was recorded and will be available on the Concord Can website, because I think there was more information in that anybody could possibly absorb. So thank you so much. I would like to ask Laura Davis to briefly or to talk about electric bicycles. I know she is an enormous enthusiast, and I know she basically replaced a car with a cargo bike. So Laura, please go unmute yourself and go ahead. And do you need to share your screen?
I do have a screen
You did
share.
already.
Does that look good to everybody?
Yes, it does.
All right. So that's a very hard act to follow. I have a much briefer and more informal presentation for you. As Janet said, I am a huge e-bike enthusiast. I'm a Concord resident, and I did replace my car with an e-cargo bike back in August of 2021. So it's been about a year and a half now that we've been a one-car family here in Concord. I'm also, in my professional life, a transportation advocate. So I love talking about all modes of transportation, including electric vehicles. So I'm really excited to be here. I like to call electric bicycles the other EV because it's another electrified form of transportation. And when we talk about reducing emissions from the transportation sector, we're usually talking about a two-pronged strategy, electrifying all of our modes of transportation and also reducing vehicle miles traveled, especially in single occupancy vehicles. So e-bicycles do both of those things, help shift people out of their cars, and also is a great clean electric form of transportation. And you may hear my son singing to himself in the background. He's home today, so just want to, it is my background noise that you're hearing. Just a really quick, like, if you don't know anything about electric bicycles, I think that it's worthwhile to just learn a little bit about them. The vast majority of bicycles that are out there today are Class 1 pedal assist bicycles. This means that you pedal it just like a regular bicycle, but there is a small electric motor with a small battery that's going to give you a boost. And so it's very similar to riding an electric bicycle from the rider's perspective. And there are typically multiple levels of assistance. So you can ride it completely off with no assistance at all. You can ride it in eco mode, which is just like having the wind at your back. Or you can ride it in turbo mode, which is kind of like having dad push you up the hill when you're a little kid. So that's Class 1. Class 2 has a throttle. So in addition to that pedal assist mode, they usually have a button or a paddle that you can push that will propel the bicycle without pedaling. And these kind of get a bad rep, but the wonderful thing about those throttles is that it does allow a lot of people who can't pedal a bicycle because of physical abilities to, use a bicycle for transportation. It can also help if you're at a dead stop, getting you going. A lot of people just use the throttle for that. And then Class 3 bicycles are much more are much rarer. Most people don't have these, especially in Massachusetts. And they have a higher cap to their electric assist. So these are capped at 28 miles per hour, whereas Class 1 and Class 2 are capped at 20 miles per hour. So that means the electric motor will cut off at that point. And I think it's important to say that that is the maximum they will help you to. That's not your average speed. I average about 12.5 miles per hour on my electric bicycle, even though I ride it in turbo mode almost all the time. So that's just a little electric bicycle 101 for you. There are coming incentives for electric bicycles coming from the state level. Everybody. Shh. So last year, there was a law passed that created electric bike rebates, $500 per bicycle and $750 for income qualifying residents. And there were $1 million allocated for this program as part of that legislation. We don't know exactly what the timeline is for the rollout of this program. It's going to be administered by the Department of Energy Resources. I've heard estimates that it might come out sometime later next summer, but it's still very unclear. The best source of information to find out about when this might come out, in addition to just, the news, is Mass Bike has been leading on this. And so they post updates on their website. So I'm sure whenever they'll be the first to know if the program has a timeline for rolling out. So you can look ahead to those incentives. These are going to be point of sale rebates. So you'll be able to go to a bike shop and buy a bike and have this point of sale rebate. In terms of the cost of an electric bicycle, one of the wonderful things is that if you're not in a position to replace your car for whatever reason, this can be a wonderful way to shift a lot of your transportation away from a gas-powered car. And they're much less expensive than buying a new car. So I always say that like a good e-bike starts around $1,800, which sounds like a lot if you're thinking about a bicycle as a toy, but if you're thinking about it as a tool for transportation, less than $2,000 is a pretty good price for a vehicle. So you can get e-bikes for less than $1,800. You can, but you want to be careful not to buy a low quality e-bike because they tend to be very expensive to maintain. And there is some risk of mechanical failure if you buy a very low quality e-bike. So you want to make sure that you're buying one that's going to serve you well. Just briefly, this is the question I get the most. What about the winter? They do make studded snow tires for bicycles. I ride my bike in all seasons, in all weather. If it's not safe for you to drive, it's not safe for me to ride my bicycle. So, that's kind of the line that I draw it at. But there are these wonderful studded snow tires. And, I'll leave you with this. This is my favorite quote. You don't need a 2-ton vehicle to get a tomato. There's a lot that we can do. Concord is not a very big community. It's only about 5 miles from end to end. So there's a lot of everyday trips that you can replace a car with an e-bike. And the more people that we have using active forms of transportation around our community, the more incentive we have to improve the infrastructure to support it. So that is what I'll leave you with. You don't need a 2-ton vehicle to get a tomato. So thank you so much for having me, Janet.
Well, thank you, Laura. That was really, really interesting.
So our first question is the income limit for qualifying for a rebate gross income or taxable income?
The income limit for the qualifying rebate for the federal incentives, that's a good question. I believe it's taxable income. I know that for the tax credits, it is taxable income, not gross income. But let me look into that and we'll get an answer on that. I'm sure it's spelled out somewhere in the code. But as far as the tax credits go, they are based on taxable income, or more specifically, they're based on tax liability, which is usually related to your taxable income, though not strictly. So you have to have the tax liability. So but here I think we're talking about the new income restrictions, which I think are cap out at about $300,000 for the eligibility, even to be eligible for those rebates. So.
Okay, I don't see anybody with a raised hand, so maybe Scott can ask the next question.
Great. So are there any tax credits or rebates for installing a level 2 charging unit at a residence? If so, how can we apply for the credit rebate?
Yeah, so we went over the two. We know there's the federal tax credit of 30% or $1,000 for residential and larger for commercial. And then there are the residential and commercial rebates through CMLP that you can separately apply for.
Great. A number of questions about whether this content's going to be made available. Yes, this will be available on the Concord CAN website. And potentially we can also, Jan, make this video available for you and you can have it put on the Concord Town website. Is that possible?
We can look into that, sure.
Great, thanks. Okay, question. Do you think the CMLP budget for EV incentives is sufficient to cover the demand?
Yes, I think it is. I don't see a problem with that in the foreseeable future.
Okay, I see a hand raised. Bob and Janet, I don't know which one has the question.
Well, I have a question for Jan Assetti over at CMLP. I've heard various claims, and I'm wondering, is there an easy answer to the question, how much of the power that CMLP provides is taken from renewable resources at this point?
So we have a whole web page devoted to that topic. Should I just give you should I share my screen quickly and show that to you?
And can you put a link in the chat to that web page? It's hard
Sure.
to navigate the darn town website.
Okay. Sure, absolutely. So let me just show it to you first. So actually, do you see right here CMLP's homepage? So here is the announcement for the public forum. Do people see that? Can I just see a few? Okay, great. And I put that information in the chat as well. So to find out more about CMLP's power supply and its sources, what you want to do is you want to hover over this electric services menu item on the left, and then you'll see this window. This window will pop up, and you want to then click on Power Supply Portfolio here. And when you do that, you will see a lot of information. This is kind of a high-level view of the different sources of our power. And then if you scroll down a bit, you will see that here, what we show is we show what percentage of our power supply comes from carbon-free sources. And there's two flavors here. One is where we purchase power directly from a solar facility, hydro facility, wind facility, and we retire the renewable energy credits that go along with it. So the renewable energy credits are a measure of the amount of carbon-free power from a particular facility. So when we retire those credits rather than selling them, that means no one else can claim they are using that carbon-free power. And that, I believe, is this total associated percentage. And then we also buy renewable energy credits associated with carbon-free power generation facilities where we don't buy the power directly, but our investment in those facilities makes it possible for them to generate power, carbon-free power. And the renewable energy credits, or RECs, are shown here under non-associated. So if you add those up, we here, this total as a percentage of sales is the percentage of our power supply that is considered to be carbon free. And as you can see, in 2022 estimated, which won't be actual until somewhere in the middle of 2023, we'll have the actual number. We're very close to 100%. And in 2023, we are forecasted to exceed 100% carbon-free power between what we actually purchase directly and the RECs, the renewable energy credits, which we purchase to offset the power that actually is generated from natural gas, for example. And you can read, there's Bob, I think what you might be getting at is there's a number of different ways of looking at this, and different people look at this differently. And so what we've tried to do is lay out these different purchases that we make, how they offset our power supply, and you can read through it yourself and come to your own conclusion essentially about what makes sense to you in terms of how we calculate this.
Oh, that was very informative. Thank you. I see why there's various claims now. Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to say one other thing for anybody who's on virtually here. If you're not very familiar with Zoom, you can raise your hand virtually by going to the little bar at the bottom. And what does that say? Reactions. Reactions, and then you get icons. And at least on my computer, the raised hand is below all the others. So look for it there.
We have a couple other questions here. Comment. I'm a huge fan of EVs, but recently someone asked me how fueling EVs will generate taxes that are currently done with gas. So a policy question on taxation from gas. Any thinking on that, Mark or Jan?
Yes, you may have seen in national news that some states have already moved towards creating special taxes for electric and or hybrid vehicles because of the reduction in gasoline taxes that those vehicles, in order to fund the road maintenance and other things that those funds are used for. And whereas in other states like Massachusetts, they've held off on enacting any kind of that policy because they don't want to send a mixed message, and they don't want to have any negative impact on the incentives and policy that are in place to encourage EV adoption at this time. I think there is considered that in the future, there is a threshold or a point at which where adoption reaches a certain level where it'll be important to start recovering taxes. That's not what's happening in other states. None of them have reached that threshold yet. California certainly would be the first one to reach that. So if you kind of watch what's going to happen in California with regards to that, you're likely to see that other states like Massachusetts will follow suit and shift towards a more mileage-based tax, which of course also needs to be done in a responsible way so it doesn't end up being regressive and have a negative impact that doesn't encourage people to switch to more fuel efficient or electric vehicles just because the mileage costs the same in tax. So it's definitely something that's on the minds of policymakers, and something that you'll see in the future where we'll be shifting from fuel-based tax to some sort of mileage or vehicle type-based tax in order to collect that revenue. We don't expect it within the next few years, at least in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is focused for the next 5 years at least on EV incentives.
Thanks, Mark. Comment here, question from Mary. Retirees who have their taxes automatically taken out of their Social Security checks won't be able to use the federal rebate then?
So the federal rebate, as I mentioned earlier, is based on tax liability. So retirees still often do have a tax liability. So whenever taxes are taken out or owed by anyone, that creates a certain level of eligibility for a non-refundable tax credit. So now if they're on a very low fixed budget income, it's likely that somebody may not have owed or paid $7,500 in tax. So they may not be fully eligible for the tax rebate. However, whatever your liability is, that measures your eligibility. So if you had $4,000 of eligibility, you'd still be fully eligible for for example, the used EV rebate, used EV tax credit.
And Mark, they're still eligible for the Massachusetts state.
Correct. That has no income requirements. It just requires being a Massachusetts resident and purchasing a vehicle from a Massachusetts auto dealer. That's pretty much it.
And then last is just a thank you for the e-bike presentation, Laura. So Janet, back to you. I think we've answered all the questions.
Yeah, well, we're certainly coming to the end of our time. It was incredibly informative. And as I said before, I'm so glad that has been recorded and will be available on the Concord CAN website. And just want to thank you all. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Laura, for great presentations. And I see Pamela's hand is up. So if you want to make a brief comment, Pamela.
Just briefly, I recommended some videos that I've stuck in the chat. And I wish to encourage anyone else to put important videos that they think would inform us into the chat as well.
Oh, hold on, late breaking question here. Does Mark have any estimates on the number of DC fast chargers planned in Massachusetts and nationwide?
So if you hadn't been following the news on this, this was something separately that was going on related to the BIL law that was passed, and an initiative that has really been undertaken by a new department in the federal government, which is called, it's got a long name, it's the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. So at a national level, they are there now to support this effort, particularly of DC fast chargers being installed both as highway corridor chargers, which is an important part of long distance travel. So just like you would go to the gas station and you're taking a long trip and it's at a rest stop, it's that kind of model, but also DC fast chargers that are more of a community hub type resource around your community or around metro urban areas for more of a regular day-to-day, week-to-week charging. And so this is really being taken in a coordinated way. And one way that was done was all the states were given a deadline to submit their plans to the federal government for the funding they would receive. And in those plans, and you can look up on the Massachusetts state website, that's probably the best resource to see about the DC fast chargers being planned in that initial plan, which has been submitted to the federal government and approved for funding back to where they're going to put those chargers. So that is the initial plan that is for the highway corridor chargers. And there's a secondary plan, which is in the works and going to be announced soon, which is for the community hub chargers, which are going to have different criteria. They don't have to be, for example, within a mile of a major highway. There's going to be different thinking about, environmental justice and equity. Makes sense to put them there, for example, in those. So the good news is this has been a sore point for a lot of EV drivers in Massachusetts, that there isn't enough of the DC fast chargers, and where they are, there aren't enough units. Sometimes there's only one unit. So this is being solved on a federal level and working with the states to do that. And if you want more info about that, to see the latest, I suggest going to the Massachusetts state website and taking a look at that plan, which has been submitted and approved.
And they're also broken half the time. But there's good news in that Tesla supercharging system is going to be opened up to other chargers, other vehicles. And it would be great to encourage the government to adopt the Tesla supercharging system because it's better. And it's also implemented better. And as soon as that gets available to all electric vehicles, electric vehicle travel will be vastly improved.
Janet Rothrock, you had something to say.
Yeah, just a real quick question. I'm sure this is way too complicated to actually answer, but it always seemed odd to me that I couldn't if I had an electric vehicle and I wanted to, but it was not a Tesla and I wanted to use a Tesla station for charging, why could I not just get a plug adapter? If I go to Britain and I want to if I want to charge my phone, there's a certain adapter I stick into the wall. If I go over to Belgium, it's a different shaped adapter and so on. So why can't somebody invent something so that we can, all the Chevy Volt people can suck up the Tesla electricity or vice versa? It just seems like compatibility would be a really nice thing to have. And I recommend that the federal government do whatever's required to make that happen. So is there anything in physics why it couldn't happen?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much.
So the Tesla supercharger network is a very high power level 3 type charging system and specifically designed for Tesla vehicles. And so it would require each manufacturer to create something specifically that would work for their vehicle, or somebody to establish a brand new connection standard. So
That's it, the standard.
So instead, it makes more sense what Pamela mentioned, which was for Tesla itself to come up with a design that where their charging sites can incorporate the other main standard, which is called CCS, combined charging system.
But
that virtually all non-Tesla vehicles that you can buy right now have a CCS charger on the car. So that's what they would need to connect to be able to fast charge at this time.
And Tesla has developed one that will attach to their superchargers that will automatically be attached when CCS drivers come up.
Well, I think it's time to wrap up. It's a couple of minutes after 9. So I just want to thank everybody for this very informative meeting.